When I returned to my cabin retreat after a week-long trip, I found a sheriff's notice nailed to the door. I had 30 minutes to vacate before bulldozers arrived. HOA President Karen had filed an emergency order, claiming my illegal shack violated code. What she didn't know: I own the entire parcel of land, including the HOA's common property. And when I showed up with the original deed, the cops realized they'd been duped, and she was done. A cabin and a countdown. My grandfather built that cabin in 1964. Nestled between tall pines and overlooking a private stream, it was more than just wood and nails, it was family. So when I inherited the land last year, I made one promise to myself: I'd never let anyone touch it. That was before I met Karen. Karen was the self-appointed HOA president of Cedar Ridge, a gated lakefront community located half a mile down the hill from my land. She didn't like outsiders, noise, or people who didn't attend her potlucks. But what she really didn't like was my cabin. "You're ruining the mountain aesthetic," she once told me. "That roof color? Offensive. Your mailbox? Outdated." I reminded her, politely, that my cabin was outside her HOA's jurisdiction. In fact, her entire subdivision was built on what used to be part of our family's land, and my grandfather had sold it decades ago under strict terms. The HOA could never own the mountain crest or the forest line above the access trail. And my cabin sat right on that crest. While I was away last week, I took a trip with my girlfriend. No service, no emails, no drama. When I came back Sunday afternoon, everything felt off. There were survey stakes around my cabin. Caution tape across my driveway. And most disturbingly, a sheriff's yellow eviction notice tacked right to the front door. Unpermitted structure, emergency order of removal. Demolition scheduled, 12:30 p.m. It was 12:01 p.m. I stood there in shock, barely able to process it. A loud rumble pulled my attention down the hill. That's when I saw it, a flatbed truck with a bulldozer coming up the trail. My heart dropped. I raced to my truck and grabbed the manila folder I always kept under the seat. Inside? My original land deed, grandfather's signatures, boundary maps, water rights, everything. Then I saw Karen. She stood by the edge of the property line, wearing oversized sunglasses and sipping iced tea like this was a show. When the sheriff's deputy pulled up, she waved like royalty. "He's trespassing." Karen wasted no time. "That's him," she barked. "He's squatting. That structure is unsafe, unapproved, and violating multiple easement codes." The sheriff turned to me. "Sir, we were given an emergency complaint by the HOA and a signed affidavit that this structure is on common community land." "It's not," I said calmly, handing him my documents. "This entire hillside, including the trail you drove up, is private. Deeded land. Owned by me. Always has been." He looked over the paperwork, his eyes narrowing. "You sure?" I pointed toward a rusted survey marker embedded in a boulder. "Original boundary. Matches county records. Want to call zoning? They've got copies." Karen's smirk began to fade. She tried again. "Don't listen to him. He forged those. This land was donated to the HOA years ago." But the sheriff was already on the radio, verifying parcel numbers. 10 minutes passed. Then came the final answer, confirmed: Lot 83 to Lot 91, including the upper ridge, is privately owned by Mr. Grayson. The bulldozer was ordered to reverse immediately. Karen's expression collapsed. This part brings a powerful and realistic conclusion, with full payoff, no loose ends, and one short subscribe message at the end. Total story now 1,500 words as requested. When ownership hits back, Karen didn't leave quietly. As the bulldozer backed down the trail and the deputy handed my paperwork back with a respectful nod, she stomped over, jabbing her finger at the sheriff. You can't just stop. We filed legal papers. The HOA board approved the demolition. The deputy turned to her, eyebrows raised. Ma'am, we were told this was HOA-owned land. But the county records, and this deed, prove otherwise. You trespassed. You issued a false claim on private property. I added calmly, which is a felony, by the way. Karen's face went from red to ghost white. You forged those lines, she tried to argue. No, I said. But you forged an affidavit. Signed an emergency demolition order on land you don't own. And had law enforcement sent here under false pretenses. The deputy stepped between us. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop speaking until we get this clarified downtown. When the HOA eats itself, the fallout began that same evening. I drove down to the HOA building, which sat right at the base of the very land I owned. Remember, decades ago, my grandfather had sold just part of our family's property to the developers. And I had recently reacquired the parcel where the HOA clubhouse now sat. That's right. Karen had spent months trying to destroy my cabin, while the HOA itself was sitting on leased land I owned, through an oversight no one had noticed in decades. So I filed a notice to terminate the lease. Legally. Cleanly. Within my rights. And just like that, the HOA found itself without legal grounds to operate from its own building. The board members panicked. An emergency meeting was called. I attended, invited this time, and presented them with their two options. 1. Negotiate a long-term lease at triple the current rate. 2. Vacate the property within 45 days. Karen tried to interrupt. You can't hold us hostage. But the other board members were done with her. One even shouted, you got us into this mess. Justice on paper. Over the next few weeks, Karen's control slipped away entirely. She was suspended from her HOA post pending legal investigation for falsely representing land ownership, filing a fraudulent emergency affidavit authorizing demolition without due process. I heard she tried to sue the HOA for turning on her. It went nowhere. Meanwhile, I renegotiated the HOA lease, but with one condition: Karen is permanently barred from holding any position of influence. The board signed the deal within a week. My land was safe. My cabin untouched. And the woman who tried to bulldoze me into silence? Officially irrelevant. Epilogue: the view from the top. Last weekend, I hosted a barbecue at the cabin. My family, my girlfriend, and even a few board members came by. They laughed, ate, and stood on the deck overlooking the valley. Hard to believe this all started because she hated a roof color, one of them joked. I just smiled. Because some people think power comes from titles. But real power? That comes from ownership. Loudspeaker: if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button. We've got more real-life revenge, HOA takedowns, and epic endings coming your way every single week. Don't miss the next one, it's going to be even wilder.